What's up, everybody? This is Grant at Cause Artist. Welcome to episode 112 of the Disruptors for Good podcast. Today, I'm going to speak with Sophia Wang, the co-founder of MycoWorks, on disrupting the fashion industry by creating a biomaterials company that has developed natural alternatives to leather and plastic using mushroom mycelium technology. I know that sounds like a lot, maybe a bit of a mouthful, but Sophia actually explains it really well, and we go through a lot of her journey and her discovery of mycelium and sort of what it can do for the materials industry and specifically the fashion industry which they're focused on right now heavily. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy and hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. Well, thanks, Sophia, for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about everything you've done up to this point, and I think what the future holds for you and the company is really quite exciting. But I wanted to touch on something a little bit about your journey and that how does a person who has a PhD in English specializing in 20th century and 21st century experimental American poetry start a biotech fashion company?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I would say that the genesis for all this really is the magical intersection of art and science. So I grew up in a household, two research scientists. Both my parents are research scientists in biology, molecular cell biology and biochemistry. So I grew up thinking about the world is living biological systems and how things within the body and on a macro level are grown and made. And I was also trained as an artist, as a visual artist and a writer. So always thinking across worlds, but also thinking about concepts that are portable and how storytelling and narratives really help us see the world. And fast forward to my young adult years, I'm doing my PhD in English at UC Berkeley, and I'm also starting a dance company. I'm a dancer, so I have an eclectic foundation. Anyway, I'm an artist in academia, and I'm thinking I'd like to professionalize in the art world because I see myself going in that direction more than into academia. So I decided to take a art internship with a local artist that I'd met here in the Bay Area named Phil Ross. And Phil is an artist who's been working with living materials as an art medium for as long as his practice. I mean, the 80s, 90s when he started making work. And it was around 2007. And I joined him as an artist assistant. He was working on an exhibit on the history of bioreactors, seen through the lens of culture and art and design. And so bioreactors interpreted broadly, like everything from a petri dish to an actual bioreactor where you're growing muscle cell tissue, or an amphora where you're fermenting wine. So any contained, designed environment where you can control the environment to grow a living thing. So we worked together on this exhibit here in San Francisco, California, and it was a great working relationship. And it was also my first exposure to Phil's art practice, which entailed working with mycelium as a material for art and design. And mycelium, this is where I usually pause and say, what is mycelium?
Yes, what is
Yeah, so mycelium is commonly understood as the root structure of mushrooms. So you can think of it as the interwoven cellular network that forms the body of the organism that will grow mushrooms, of fungi. So a good analogy from the plant world is the mycelium is like the roots and branches and stems of an organism, and mushrooms are more like the fruit of an organism.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you typically find it underground, under the forest floor, in rotting logs. And I, of course, knew mushrooms as a thing in the world.
Sure.
But I had never heard of mycelium, had never seen it, or had never known to look for it. And Phil's artworks were demonstrating all the amazing textures and form and shapes and pliability that mycelium could express. He was making art objects and sculptures and architectural structures and blocks and bricks. And it was just remarkable. It was, when you encounter something new in the world that is natural and all around you, it opens up the world in a new way. And so it was a very rich working relationship. We did this show together. And then went our separate ways. I went to go finish my PhD in English and continued pushing forward my dance practice. And Phil continued making and exhibiting mycelium-based artworks around the world and publishing and actually starting to apply for patents around the technology of this material. And so around late 2012, which was around, I suppose, yeah, like 5 years later, Phil came back around and said, I'm receiving invitations from companies around the world that want to use my mycelium material in their manufacturing. And it's an amazing opportunity. As an individual artist, I can't partner as well with a multinational corporation. Let's start a company to actually bring this material to market. And, I was finishing my PhD, the academic job market, for tenure track English professors was looking kind of hairy. So, I got a dance company, but who makes money from dance? That's great. So I was like, this is an amazing opportunity to really bring something new into the world. And his works had demonstrated it already. His artworks had already shown it in the world, like that this was real, that this could work. And so we founded the company in 2013.
Amazing. And sort of the broad idea is that the potential of mycelium is that it can sort of theoretically like replace sort of leather and replace other ingredients within sort of the textile and fashion industry that is sort of harmful to the environment, and kind of really take the industry sort of to a next level from a manufacturing and textile standpoint using this sort of material.
Yes. What's remarkable about mycelium is how engineerable and versatile it is as a natural material. So I would say that that's the first thing to point out, which is it is a natural material and it can go basically, we know, wherever you see soft goods right now. So yes, like focusing on the comparison to leather, we do consider our product, which we're calling fine mycelium and in its finished form reishi, as an option for leather. And the idea that it will replace leather is, I think, attractive for some people according to their values. Yeah. I think it's really exciting to think about it as an option that aligns with people's evolving values and the evolving needs of the industry and the world at large. So absolutely, it's a material that can be engineered into rigid, flexible, dense, light forms, any size, shape, expression. You can grow it with composites. It's very customizable. So there's that.
What are some other use cases? If you want to go outside the fashion world, what are some
other use cases? Yeah. Well, we'll start there and then focus back into what our current focus is at MycoWorks. So yeah, I mean, I would point back to what Phil's artworks back in the 90s had already demonstrated with mycelium materials, where you could make rigid panels and blocks and it can behave like a compressed foam or an expanded foam. And so Phil's work in the 90s really inspired an entire movement, I would say. Like we've seen since then a growing awareness of what mycelium is as a material, and also many endeavors and a lot of research into what else mycelium can do as a material. So there's examples of it, people developing it for, replacements for styrofoam or replacements for plastics. And so at MycoWorks, what we've developed is a process and technology that we're calling fine mycelium. And that is a process that engineers the mycelium cells as they grow to form proprietary interwoven cellular structures, which enable a material that is inherently strong and durable and flexible and customizable. So we have created a finished form of fine mycelium called reishi that is our option for fine leather for fashion and luxury. And it's being developed into products that, I mean, anywhere you can imagine where leather goes. So footwear, accessories, apparel, and beyond.
And it took, I think, a while because reishi I think just sort of released it a little bit to the public as far as doing partnerships and making things out of it. And so it took sort of a while, I guess, R&D wise, right? 2013 to now. I mean, that's a long time. Like, what were those 8 years like? Was that just R&D developing a product? Like, what were those 8 years like refining all this and going through product development. And that's a long time to kind of, really stick to something and believe in it.
Yeah, it is a long journey to bring a new material, a new biomaterial, and a new manufacturing process into the world. So in 2013, when we founded, I would say the first couple of years, we were actually focused on applications that some of Phil's artworks had demonstrated as being immediately obvious. So those were
Hmm.
more rigid applications of the material, things that you might find in, architectural application or furniture design, panels for building. So the idea was potentially a really beneficial, like green building material.
Gotcha.
And there was certainly a lot of interest in that. We had architects and interior designers and developers who were very interested in this as materials, an alternate to current building materials. It wasn't until 2015 that we started pivoting towards developing the softer form of the material, the flexible form of the
Hmm.
material that could serve as an option for leather. We were connecting with shoe and fashion companies, and they were very excited about the potential for this material to replace compressed foams and leather in their
Hmm.
products. And
Gotcha.
this was the perfect fit, I would say, in terms of value and performance. So, being a biotechnology company founded by artists, we have
Right.
a inherently creative and aesthetically oriented approach to the products that we're making. We are making beautiful products that we think open up creative possibility, and that's inherent to the practice, to where, from the practice from which the technology emerged. And also, it was a way to offer fashion companies value that they very much prioritize, which is a high quality material that also has tremendous aesthetic possibilities. That fit really took off. It's what they, right, product market fit. Like, it became very obvious this
Yeah.
is where we should be.
So many puns right now.
I know, I know. That was 2015, 2016. And that's really when we started singularly focusing on the products that would become reishi
Hmm.
and in refining our fine mycelium technology. And so the road since then has been one of working very closely with a select list of brand partners who share our values in terms of quality and performance and aesthetic excellence in their products. And it's an incredibly rich collaboration where we are sharing our materials with them. They are testing and prototyping. We are also testing and prototyping on our end, and we share our findings, and our brand partners share what their needs are in terms
Hmm.
of the material that they're looking for, the performance they're looking for, and we push our material to meet those specifications. And really exciting and rewarding after a several year journey to be able to share publicly our partnership with Hermes this past March. And they're developing an object, a bag that will be part of their fall winter collection this year, and using our material. And onwards. There's
Yeah.
so many other partnerships that I am excited about, and we are really excited to share when we're allowed to say their names.
Yeah, but I guess and the idea in maybe the future, let's say a couple of years or whatever, would be the idea that a company or a brand can sort of just reach out and say, "Hey, this is what I'm sort of looking for," and then you can sort of customly make things for them as sort of their product market fit is needed. Is that sort of the? I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of different revenue models from different things, but I assume that you will allow other people to come in and kind of, I guess, apply to be a partner or apply to get the material, or will it always be sort of this kind of exclusive partnerships, or do you want to eventually open it up?
Oh, absolutely. And the partnerships aren't exclusive in the sense that we're not we're free to
Yeah, yeah,
to develop partnerships. It's just that actually they are committed relationships,
yeah.
in the sense that, bringing a new technology into the world, a brand has to have the same values and the commitment to say, like, okay, I want to be a partner in bringing in a
Hmm.
new technology, and this is not just something where I call up the supplier
Right.
and it's available, right? It's a two-way relationship, and that's very exciting for the brands, I think, because fine mycelium as a technology offers customization. We can grow material to any size, shape, density, surface feature,
Hmm.
and beyond. that they would request, this is very exciting for them in terms of their product development and offering their customers immense value in terms of a material that is new, that is natural, that has a lower impact than the traditional materials on the market, and they get to have the pride in ownership and leadership in being pioneers in working with us to bring this into the world at scale.
Mm-hmm.
So scale is an important thing to point out, which is the
Yeah.
reason that we work with a limited set of customers is because we are committing our current inventory to them, to the relationships that we're building with them, and towards the product launches that we're developing. And we are also building out our production volumes by way of building new facilities. We're here in the Bay Area right now. We have a pilot plant, but we're looking ahead to a full-scale facility in another part of the country and beyond. So as we scale our production volumes, we are very excited to work with an ever-increasing range of partners who share our values and, in performance and quality, and are excited about the creative possibilities working with our material.
I want to talk about scale a little bit, as you mentioned. And again, coming into kind of just totally different world. And I guess you touched on the art part. It does, the parallels do run in, but scaling up a biotech business, right, is a totally different thing. And not a lot of people actually, really get to do it or have the background to do it. But what was it like raising money, right? And like talking to people about like, hey, we're trying to do this mushroom-based material for like, I guess, how was raising money for, I assume it was your first time going out and sort of trying to raise money for something, like, so how was that process, and was it fun or terrible and you never want to do it again?
I'm what they call a lifelong learner, and I like to encounter any challenge as an opportunity to learn like more about the world works. And I think the challenge of fundraising is a really great one because you understand how money moves and why money moves. And in the world that we live in, that is a very important thing to understand. You learn how to communicate value and opportunity and vision. And as someone who is raised in, the tradition of storytelling and narratives, that's such an important thing, right? And it's something that you can leverage towards, moving the world in any way that you would want, right? It doesn't have to be about just raising money. It's like, what kind of world do you want to build with me, with this technology and opportunity that I'm sharing with you? So yes, in the first couple of years when, we were just a couple of artists talking to venture capitalists, making the case on the basis of what Phil's artworks had demonstrated and my gifts as a storyteller and the vision that I could see, it was great and it was hard because the business case at the time when we were talking about building materials was tricky. Those are materials that are widely available on the market and at an economically viable scale. And we were just starting out, and it's a small scale process. It's higher cost per unit. So that was tricky. And then, I have to absolutely credit Matt Scullin, who is our CEO, who joined our team a few years into founding, who is a material science entrepreneur, had run a company, 10 years prior and had raised, tens of millions of dollars towards that effort, and really saw the opportunity with MycoWorks and the technology and the caliber of customers who were working with us. I mean, I think that's an important thing to point out in terms of the customer partnerships and that validation. So some of the earliest brand partners we were working with are the brands that have set the highest standards for fashion and luxury in the entire industry. And that was because they recognized the level of performance and quality that we had achieved in our material. They wanted to work with us. And they also loved that we were founded by artists, so that we brought into the process, creative aesthetic prioritization, which is important in fashion. So those partnerships actually were very validating, and that helped with the fundraising, because if you can say, like, if we're working with this brand, if this brand has given us their stamp of approval, that's a major thing to communicate in terms of the quality that we can offer. It got easier when Matt joined us. I'll just say that. Great. I think, and things accelerated after that because we were starting to ink more partnerships with brands And that demonstrates the viability of the technology, at least the first step towards that. And as of a couple years ago, it is not a challenge at all. I mean, we closed our Series B in 2020, the year of COVID, which is
Mm-hmm.
a remarkable achievement. I would say like 45 million, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
during a year of great, economic uncertainty and general uncertainty, because people are excited for this. I mean, the industry is ready for it. I would say that a lot has changed since we founded, and certainly since Phil started
Yeah.
working with mycelium. We see that all the brands coming to us are prioritizing seeking alternative materials that can add value to what they offer their customers and are more in line with the values of their customers and with changing needs in the industry.
I want to go back to a really interesting point you made around, hiring a CEO, right? Being two founders and kind of making the decision to do that. Was that like outside counsel? Was it VCs saying that we really think you need a CEO or some type of operator to come in and kind of help with certain things? Or was it a decision that you two both made? What was the process like of doing that? And was it a difficult decision to say to do something like that?
It was not a difficult decision. At the time, I was the
It feels good to
CEO.
probably do
Yeah,
so. Yeah, it
it
feels
does.
good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah.
One of the most important things in doing a huge endeavor is to absolutely know when you need help and
Yep.
to absolutely
Great
reach
point.
out and say it. So I think it was obvious, we'd had a couple of years, with some seed funding and pitching to, all the VCs in the Valley, and
Sure.
weren't really gaining traction. And I think an incredible strength is to know your strengths and to also know how to complement them.
Great point.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, I just knew that we needed it, and it was hard, and we were running out of money. And so I was basically opportunistically having conversations in all of my networks about
Hmm.
seeking someone like this. And it actually happened by way of a social connection through a friend who met Matt at a Dr. Octagon concert in San
Hey.
Francisco.
Oh
um,
man, see, concerts brings people together.
they
Now it
do.
just
They do. Music brings people together. That's a great side note trivia, which is Matt comes from the same social cultural milieu that me and Phil, my co-founder, come from here in the Bay Area. We share
hmm
a lot of cultural community, and
hmm
so there's a lot of resonance with our core team, with similar values in terms of the way that culture and art and creativity, storytelling play a really big role in helping you bring a new thing into the world.
Oh, I want to touch on scale real quick again, and I try to phase this question as well as I can. When you look at companies and saying that trying to do something transformational, try to do something different, trying to do something that impacts the world in one way, and maybe you don't know how it affects it in another way. But as we talk about scale, say everything goes right, and this is sort of the material that takes over, and it's kind of this global thing, and the world, the sort of industry changes and things change, and maybe it branches out into other industries. But will you have to just kind of like take all the mushrooms out the ecosystem, right? Out the ground to make all this material. And then it becomes sort of like now I guess it has the opposite, I guess, effect on what we were trying to do, right? Because then you're taking resources at scale out of Earth's ecosystem. Is that something that you think about? Is that something that is again, I don't know. These are just questions that is interesting as we talk about scale. It's hard to predict those certain things because sometimes we think about scale and just numbers and economics rather than, impact on perhaps the environment or impact on lives or whatever it may be, right? It's just kind of a odd way that I like to look at it. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally get what you're asking. And it's a really important question. Is what you're trying to bring into the world going to end up being extractive
Hmm. Right.
as opposed to regenerative in the way that many industrial
Hmm.
processes have been? And I can absolutely say that it will be a beneficial technology in the world if done right. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
I have been pointing a lot to the Business of Fashion's Sustainability Index, which was released
Mm.
earlier this year, which sets a bunch of benchmarks and targets for the fashion industry for growing into true sustainability. And they cite like 6 major categories of concern. And one is
Mm-hmm.
transparency. So, how transparent you are in your environmental and social impact, your waste, what you do with it, how much you make of it, your carbon greenhouse gas emissions,
Mm-hmm.
your water and chemical use, your workers' rights, and your materials.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really comprehensive starting
Yeah.
point for actually nuancing what it means to be sustainable,
Yeah.
because you could have high marks in one area, but
Totally.
if you're doing awful,
Yeah.
terrible things in another area, right, you don't
Yeah.
actually have the impacts you want to have. So with that as a starting point, I will say that mycelium is one of the most regenerative agents of
Mm.
bio and ecological transformation on the planet. It plays a key role in the regeneration of ecosystems, of areas that are polluted, of areas that have been burned. They
Mm-hmm.
clear the way,
Interesting.
they break down decaying matter and make biochemicals and bionutrition available to the environment again to grow new life.
Hmm.
So you may have heard about, mycelium being used to clean up oil spills and being
Hmm.
effective in areas where there's been like radioactive pollution, basically absorbing that matter
Interesting.
from the soil or from the environment and using it to grow its own sort of healthy organism. So it's a great transformer in the environment. So as a material to be out in the world and to be out in the world even more through human intervention, it's a
Interesting.
positive force. So, as far as scale and impact, mycelium grows on widely available biomass that is really the byproduct, the waste product of other industries like lumber
Mm-hmm.
production, agricultural production. We grow it essentially on sawdust and wood chips, and it can be grown on rice bran and corn stalks. So you can grow it on incredibly cheap material that would otherwise potentially be
I see.
contributing to carbon
Mm.
gas emissions through burning or other processes to remove it from the environment. And so it works as a powerful carbon sequester for the life of the
Interesting.
product.
Mm.
And so you can also produce mycelium based materials anywhere in the world where you have this kind of agricultural and lumber based production. So co-locating your materials production with your food source. And so this is exciting to investors and people in the industry because potentially you have a way of really changing the way that supply chains for materials work, introducing your materials, manufacturing very close to the source of where you
Right.
are getting your feedstock, but also potentially where you're fabricating your product. So I think that keeping in mind the broad view of what it means to be very sustainable, and so holding myself, like our own company, to those standards, everything from workers' rights to the materials to emissions to waste to water, we're in a very, very strong position to offer brands in the industry a material and all the attendant processes and practices around it that has a net positive impact.
When you first approached, right, a company or a potential partner, what were some of those first conversations like? Were people already aware of mycelium and the applications it could have within the fashion industry, or were people just like, again, like you went to investors first, kind of just like scratching your head and just be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, in the early years, people had never heard of it. It,
Hmm.
it really was a new concept. We spent a lot of time educating people on what mycelium was, that we weren't just, taking mushrooms and compressing them into
Right.
a material. It was actually the mycelium, which is a totally, in a way, different part of the organism. But that's really changed in the last 7, 8 years now. And I would say in part because of the work that we're doing to lead education and visibility around this, and also because of the work that we've inspired in terms of like artists, designers, entrepreneurs, scientists around the world who are also interested in what mycelium can do. Now there's greater awareness about mycelium as a material.
Well, I'd like to end a little bit on the future usually, and I know it's a bit hectic right now, but you really, obviously, you and the team are really sort of focused, and that I think what the end goal is, and sort of the goal for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. But what does success look like for you, and what you would like to see from product innovation, bringing on more partners? Like, what would success be for you, let's say, over the next 3 to 5 years?
Success for me would look like products on the shelves for consumers in the full range of
Mm.
where you typically see leather. So I would love to see footwear
Yeah.
and apparel and bags and accessories, and potentially getting into like upholstery, potentially,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of leather and soft goods in cars, for instance.
Yeah,
And
great.
so it's that level of ubiquity where you can see that mycelium, our product, fine mycelium, has been adopted across a wide range of applications.
Mm,
And that means that we've achieved the production scale to be able to service and supply all of those markets. And that also means that we're in a lot of places in the world.
yeah.
And I think that is where we're headed. And I'm really excited to be watching it grow from this perspective.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and explaining to me and us of how this stuff works and what it is and what's possible. I think it's always interesting to see what's next and what's going to be part of all of our futures. So appreciate you taking the time and appreciate you grinding all these years. It's such a it's so many times I imagine that you were just like, what are we doing? Like, let's just like let's go back to dance school,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's so compelling, and so obviously the world needs it and wants it, and mycelium just so clearly is out there and wants to be out there, so kept us going.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time and best of luck for the next decade, couple decades to come.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Grant.
Thanks everybody for listening to the episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to the Cause Artist partners, everyone who has signed up for it. Truly appreciate it. I will list the link in below so you can check them out. If you want to become a partner, just go to causeartist.com/partners. We'll talk soon. Thanks.